Hi everyone. My name is Jerry Wise, and I'm a life and relationship coach, and I've been helping people for over 40 years. And I use a family systems approach drawing from the deep well of Murray Bowen family systems theory to help people learn to self-differentiate and recover from codependency, adult children of narcissists, adult children of alcoholic families, and adult children of dysfunctional families. I'd like you to join my YouTube channel, and I'd like you to join the membership on the YouTube channel, which you can see join if you're not on your phone. You have to be on a browser to select membership for YouTube, and click that, and you can join and watch the exclusive content. I just put up another video today, in fact, another exclusive video just for members. It's not very expensive at all. It's like $1.99 a month, something like that. And it helps to fund doing these videos and making the free ones available for everyone. I hope you'll subscribe to my YouTube channel under subscribe, and click the bell if you want to be notified. Hit the bell if you want to be notified every time a new video comes out. And if anyone's interested in getting a new website or getting social media consulting or management, I have a team here that also works with doing that as well. So I hope you'll get a hold of me, because we'd like to help people get their message out to other people. This video is entitled The Christian Codependent. And this is actually the first video I've done with a Christian theme. Certainly it doesn't just apply to Christians. I have people of all faiths that I work with, and people who are atheists and don't have any faith. There are people who are in recovery who have higher powers and choose a higher power. But I think it relates to anyone who has some sense of spirituality, and I believe spirituality is important for recovery. I used to do codependency groups and run codependency groups and do codependency workshops. I also helped many codependent Christians recover from their codependency so they could experience a more full spiritual life with God. I was a pastor for many years. I was a priest for many years. I was a bishop for many years. And I wanted to at least bring that experience that I've had to my videos as well. And so I'll probably be starting a playlist for those who are Christians. I became a Christian back in the 1970s. While I was in college and undergraduate studying music and pre-law. And I found Christ at that point. And I struggled very much with regard to codependency, and struggled with that for many years, which also directed and defined a lot of decisions I made as a Christian at that time. Codependents are often attracted to the church and to religious experiences because they tend to be a little more empathetic, and they tend to be more internally oriented in terms of whether dependency needs or feeling issues. And so we'll find ourselves gravitating towards the church and gravitating towards faith. Christian faith can be a comfort and provide a love from God that we may not have experienced growing up. And that can be a real healing experience. In this video, I want to talk about the downsides of Christian codependency and how it may hinder our relationship with God and the church group that we're a part of. I believe the church and religious groups attract codependents. I think it also attracts narcissists too. I'm sure many of you have heard of narcissistic pastors and other narcissists who are in the church. And also you may have experienced a lot of codependency in the church. Codependency damages and limits our experience of God, is my belief, because it shapes our filter in how we see, believe, and hear from God. And of course, our family of origin shapes our view of the world and of God. Where did you first learn about God? Well, when I was studying pastoral counseling in seminary, one of the things we learned, and there was a great book, and I cannot think of the book's name. I've tried to for years. I'm going to find that book. And it talks about our parents as being our first God. And from that experience, we then bring that to our experience of God. Because our parents and our caregivers are our first gods. Because that's how we understand the universe, and that's how we began to learn about God even from our infancy and in childhood. Codependency begins in our childhood often, and we take it into our adulthood. And then if we become a Christian, we now have both our Christian faith and codependency. Codependency also affects how we read and understand the Bible, believe it or not. I remember reading and studying the Bible, 8 hours a day, reading it all of the time. And I was in the throes of my codependency and remember how I read certain verses. I gravitated to Watchman Nee's teaching. Some of you may remember that from many decades ago. Watchman Nee and other teachers who were like him, which they confirm my codependent view of the Bible and of humanity and of spirituality. And in fact, so much of the teaching was so anti-human, wanting me to become spiritual and being very down on my humanity. Now, I came to believe that humanity was made by God and it was good in its beginning. Now, we had a disease called sin and the fall in the garden, but humanity is not a bad thing. And we want to be fully human in Christ is what I came to believe in a more healthy way. But before that, my codependency said I needed to reject me, only love God, only focus on God, and leave Jerry out of it because he's just bad and sinful and a toxic humanity. After doing recovery and therapy for codependency, I found and heard and listened to the Bible differently with my new awareness. Our codependency really does shape how we read the Bible and what verses stand out to us. Because remember, we do take our own views of the world to the Bible with us. And remember, just because we have found Christ or you have been saved, we still keep our imprinting from our family of origin dynamics within us. And our family still operates within us. And how we operated in the family and how we operate in the family now, it's still within us. That's also going to be a filter that we use to read the Bible, to pray, to do all those spiritual things that are very important to Christians. So how does how does codependency affect our spirituality and spiritual experience of God? I think of my codependent spirituality as the spirituality that never gets in. It never totally gets inside me. We tend to experience God out there somewhere. And we tend to have a head and heart gap. We think about God, we think about what's true, we read the Bible, but many times it doesn't get down here from the neck on down for those who are codependent. And so we have that head and heart gap. And we tend to have an outside-in relationship with God. He's out there and we're trying to get him in, is what we're trying to do. And believe it or not, we do that in all of our relationships. Relationships are external and we try to get them in. And so we'll fuse or enmesh or be codependent with others to try to get love, acceptance, and relationship and intimacy within us in the relationship. We often feel the worst sin is to be selfish or to do self-care or focus on ourselves. And I don't think there's anywhere in the Bible that says you shouldn't do that. There talks about know thyself, love your neighbor as yourself. And again, your codependency will shade those verses and how you understand those. Our prayer life is often used out of a sense of powerlessness. We feel powerless as codependents. And so we may get into weaponizing Bible verses, that we can say Bible verses or use Bible verses to change the universe with them, to speak it into existence, etc. And I was a part of many faith groups, many charismatic groups, many groups that definitely emphasize the power of the Holy Spirit. But I didn't feel I had any power or any empowerment because I was codependent. And we will use claiming the name of Jesus and many times use prayer to avoid ourselves, to avoid loneliness, and to also many times to avoid intimacy with God. We have a power relationship with prayer versus an intimate relationship with God. And I think that's where it's an important distinction we make in the maturing of our spiritual life. I've also trained a number of coaches and Christian coaches as they help people with their spirituality, whether Roman Catholic or Baptist or Methodist, and I've been in most of those churches, almost all the churches. I did music for a living. I did Christian music. And in fact, I have an album that you can go look on Spotify right now. It's called Sing Throughout the Land. You can watch it, or you can listen to it free of charge, which is a part of the Christian ministry that I did of worship and music back in the day, many decades ago. Also, I remember having the pleasure of working with some artists, and I think in 1980 or something like that, I was on the #1 Christian album and was doing the background vocals for that particular album. And so I've had a lot of experience in many different churches and many different types of faith. As codependents, we focus often on the do's and don'ts of spirituality, and we become legalists for ourselves. We can be very legalistic as codependents, and we're very afraid to step outside the line because God will get us if we get outside that line or do anything wrong. And so we have a heightened tension and anxiety in our spirituality. And many codependents do feel a lot of anxiety from their family of origin as they experience it now, their own systems anxiety, and they take that to their relationship with God as well. Because we're always wondering, I wonder what God's thinking. I wonder what God's doing. Is he happy with me? Is he not happy with me? And we have that constant critical nature and worry going on within us. As codependents, we can have difficulty in worship. And worship is about adult play. And I used to teach about worship. Singing, clapping, dancing, making a joyful noise, raising your hands, dressing up, singing hymns. Even pastors and priests dress up, and I should have brought my big chasuble that I used to wear. That's a very big poncho that's all decorated and beautiful. And so we dress up for our worship experience. And that's adult and spiritual play is what we're doing. But we can have difficulties doing that because we're not so good at playing. That takes letting ourselves go. And that can be a problem for codependents. We also can have difficulties in relating to authority. We can feel intimidated by authority. We can feel less than those who are in authority and not recognizing, of course, we can honor and respect those who are in positions of authority or positions in leadership in the church, but they're not better than us and we're not less than them. They are humans just like we are. But you can be human just like us and still respect someone for the position that they have. But we often end up with some difficulties with authorities because we will see them like our family of origin, and that will be a struggle. We have difficulties relating to others in the church and feel hurt or resentful often. We feel our overfunctioning is a cross we have to bear. Rather than healing the overfunctioning, we just figure that's what God's called us to do, and we just have to do that, and that's the way I please God. And of course, we're always focused on, am I pleasing God? Am I pleasing God? Because I don't think He's pleased with me. As codependents, we don't feel people are pleased with us or accept us. So also with God, we don't feel He accepts us and He's pleased with us. We can experience church life much like our dysfunctional family. And it's amazing how many codependents get involved in churches that are very much like their dysfunctional family. We're brothers and sisters, father so-and-so, the church is our mother, all of those kinds of family words that are used in the church. It can end up just becoming like a dysfunctional family of origin. And many people wind up in churches that are can be abusive, can be out of balance, and create lots of problems for us as codependents. Because we're trying to be okay, because we don't feel okay, and we haven't experienced that deep love. And I think so many times as a codependent Christian, I'm not sure I really experienced the good news of salvation, the good news of love, the good news of forgiveness, because I didn't feel I really deserved that. So it was hard to experience that. Prayer life can be difficult as well. I was just talking to a very strong Christian, wonderful woman, just the other day, and how difficult her prayer life and reading the Bible and doing that, because she doesn't feel worthy enough. She doesn't feel special enough. She indicated that she felt it would be okay if I pray with others, where 2 or 3 are gathered. I can pray with others and God will hear that. But if I pray myself, God's really not going to pay much attention to that, because that's just me. And you know how I am. And we may not feel worthy to ask God for help. We are helpers, but we don't feel comfortable in the needing help role. We feel comfortable in the caretaking role. Well, what happens if I'm not comfortable in the caretaking role and it is God's place to be a caretaker for me? As I said before, scripture reading can feel overwhelming. There are so many things we must do and must not do. We can get caught up in legalism and judge ourselves very harshly and critically. This can shade the color of how we hear the Bible and how we hear God speaking to us. Sermons and homilies and teachings given by pastors or leaders in the church can feel condemning, guilt-producing, shame-producing. And we'll say, oh, he or she is just talking directly to us, because we're so attuned to being rejected and condemned and to be guilted. And we're so attuned to that we will take that very personally, when maybe the pastor wasn't talking about you at all. Caring and doing are equivalent for the codependent Christian. If I care about you, I'm doing. We do little self-care. We do a lot for others or the church. Nancy Eisenman, in her video that we have up on our website called the one question codependency test, and she talks about baking the dozens of cookies for people. And somebody asked her if she could do a dozen cookies, but it was really inconvenient, not good for her to do that. But if she bakes those dozen cookies, then she's liked and accepted, and that we've really fulfilled our mission in Christ. When in actuality, we didn't balance out our sense of what God wants for us and what He wants us to do. And we can also have damaging consequences for all of this doing, because it can damage our kids, our relationships, our friendships, our family relationships, because we're always trying to get acceptance and not be rejected and being loved and hopefully to get that love. But as I say, it never gets in. It never totally gets in for those of us who are codependent. We are often always wanting to fix others, to perfect others, to improve the well-being and spiritual health of others. We can even use our religion and our faith to accomplish this. Sometimes we even get in God's way when he's trying to help someone find him. We are there to enable them to avoid consequences that maybe God wants them to have, so they can learn more about him and learn more about themselves. And we often don't know the value of tough love. Tough love is very tough for a codependent. We feel that over-focusing on others is the right way to be a Christian. It feels so normal. And later I say, our normal, we don't know what normal is. And I'm going to mention that in a minute. And for us, normal isn't normal. And it's right there. It's the next point. And so being that normalcy about over-focusing on others is the right way to be a Christian. And if that's our normal, I don't know that that's what God says anywhere that we should be. Our doing tends to come out of a sense of unworthiness and needing to please. Our faith tends to be invested in works versus faith, even though we want to believe it's based on faith and not works. But oftentimes we're doing the works to try to fill up who we are and to deal with our self-esteem, deal with our self-love, deal with our self-acceptance. We don't have those things, so we're all about doing so that we can be worthy. Codependent Christians also will struggle with confused feelings. And I remember teaching a seminar at the Christian Counseling Center where I worked, and we talked about, say, for example, guilt. Many Christians believe guilt is just guilt. And if it's guilt, then it's your conscience or the Holy Spirit telling you you're doing something wrong. That's not exactly right, because there's false guilt, there's spiritual guilt, there may be demonic guilt, there is family systems guilt, and then there can be true guilt. So not all guilt is equal. And we as codependents many times see guilt as just guilt. That if I feel guilt, then I'm doing something wrong. Well, you can do something right and feel guilty if you grew up in a dysfunctional family. I want to say that as I look and as I've taught the Bible, looked at the Bible, and also as I studied pastoral psychology, the Bible is not a book of psychology, nor is it a book about recovery or codependency. It's a book about spiritual salvation and spiritual life in a living God. I don't like to reduce it down to a book of psychology or a book of science, which it is not. Even as, we send out the apostles to the four corners of the globe, well, they believed the globe was flat and had four corners at that time. So that's why you send it out to the four corners of the earth. And so it's not a book about that. It's a book and testimony and a witness to a living God and a higher power. So I don't like to reduce it to a book of psychology. We need God. We need a higher power in our recovery, but we may need help in our recovery. Psychology, coaching, therapy, and recovery all move hand in glove with our higher power, whomever that is. And so I think we can utilize what we have learned in the psychological realm and psychological sciences and utilize that to enhance our faith and not to detract from our faith or our beliefs. I would like to ask you to subscribe today to this YouTube channel. I hope you'll follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I want to thank you today for joining me. I hope you have a great day, and be wise. Hi everyone. In this video, I want to discuss 5 mind games narcissistic parents use to keep you trapped and how you can break free from their manipulative tactics. Before we dive in, I want to invite you to enjoy my free training, Build the Self You Were Never Allowed to Have. This training will help you break from family dysfunction and effectively navigate others' manipulations and mind games without losing who you truly are. I'm Jerry Weiss, and for 45 years I've helped hundreds of thousands of people break free from the grip of dysfunctional family dynamics. Using a powerful method of self-differentiation, my mission is to help you to build a strong, confident sense of self, resilient, empowered, and free to live beyond the pull of others' control, manipulation, and dysfunction. So let's dive into some of the most common mind games narcissistic parents use. These tactics aren't always obvious, but they are designed to keep you doubting yourself, keep you emotionally drained, and keep you under their control. Here are 5 to watch for. Some of them you may have heard of, but I want to go over these 5. Number 1, gaslighting. Narcissistic parents deny things ever happened or call you too sensitive about the intensity of certain things. In other words, they bend the reality of it. They may, shoot your tire and flatten it with a gun and act like all they did was stepped on a flower in your garden or something. The reality that they express is not the reality of what is happening. They might twist facts to suit their narrative or bend what would be normal to most people and bend it in a way that is not normal. Over time, this makes you doubt your memory and you feel unsure of yourself. It's like walking through a fog. So gaslighting is that experience and that game that gets played with us in which we should just not trust our senses. We should not trust our judgment. We should not trust our feelings. We should not trust our responses. And we should not learn anything from our reactivity, because none of that is appropriate according to the narcissistic parent. And that's gaslighting. Now, what can you do? You can begin by writing things down to ground yourself in reality. Make something black and white. This is what I remember happened. And this is what they said. This is what I said. So when they're saying, oh, no, I never did say that. And usually when someone is gaslighting me and says, oh, no, I never did say that, it's usually rather useless to argue with them because they're already pulling a game on you just to distort the truth. So they're not going to be convinced by your truth. They're not going to be convinced by your reality. So I will usually allow them to have the truth that they're projecting, which is not true. Many times they know it's not true. You know it's not true. And ground yourself in your own reality. Well, regardless of what you think happened, Mary, this is what I recall happening. And my responses will be according to that remembrance. So again, you want to ground yourself in your reality. And you can say that you can think whatever you think about what happened, but I can think whatever I think about what has happened. And I'm going to respond in a way based on what I remember happening. Are we sometimes wrong? Could we possibly be sometimes wrong? That's what they're hoping you'll bank on. Well, maybe you're just not, you could be wrong. Well, of course I could be wrong. But when someone's yelling and screaming at me and calling me horrible names, that's usually not something I just misremember. And they're going, oh, no, I don't remember yelling at you. I think you thought I was yelling at you, but I wasn't. If somebody was yelling at me, I'm going to remember somebody was yelling at me. So it's not one of those things, I'm just going to have some distortion about it. Usually I do remember, and when I've talked to many clients, they remember what happened, almost many times to a minute detail. And of course, the narcissistic parent is denying that. That never happened. No, I never said that. I can't imagine why you would think I would do that. Trust your own instincts. If you happen to be wrong, that 0.5%, you can always apologize. But I would stick with your instincts. is what I would do. And certainly don't get pulled into their arguments. You're not going to argue them out of their gaslighting. All you can do is claim the hill that you're on and plant your flag. I understand that's how you remember it, Aunt Susie or Uncle Bill. However, or mom or dad or brother or sister, whoever in the family you're arguing with or have challenged you about the reality. I don't recall it that way. I don't remember it that way. And I'm very confused as to why you don't remember it that way. That way I'm holding on to my reality and not arguing with them. I understand they're voicing something different, but I don't know why. And there's no sense going into that because it won't be helpful. Number 2, another game that gets played by narcissistic parents is triangulation. Murray Bowen, the grandfather of family therapy, he also started family systems therapy, or family systems theory, and he was one of the first ones to talk about triangles and triangulation. Because if you start looking at relationships in a systems way, then triangles become a much bigger and more significant dynamic that's going on in relationships. And narcissists know this. They know it intuitively. I don't know if they know it theoretically. I don't know if they know it psychologically, but they know I'm going to have to pull in others to create a drama that I want to see happen. And I need others to be the supporting actors and actresses of this play I want to have happen. And maybe they will pit one sibling against another sibling. That's another way you can triangle. Oh, well, I wish you could have done it as well as your brother. Well, I wish you were as smart as your sister. And again, that pitting one against the other. And again, that's a very important game to play. We certainly know of scapegoating. Scapegoating is a major triangulation move. In other words, we all see you on the out. And they have a we-ness that's distorted and see you as the bad person because they're not willing to open up and see more of the reality. And there may be some reasons for that, and the narcissistic parent or narcissist will see that there are reasons why they should go along with them and their thinking. Narcissistic parents want you to have to fight everywhere. They want you to fight with others. They want you to fight with siblings. They want you to argue with so-and-so. They want you to argue with this part of the family and to be in conflict with that part of the family. And of course, as a result, when we're triangulated in, because a non-triangulated life is one in which we talk one-on-one. I don't go talk to Mary about how bad you are and never tell you my feelings towards you. And now I've got Mary who's not happy with you, and you're going, why is Mary treating me coldly? And I don't know. Because I've been over there filling her head full of distorted unreality so that she will remain on my side and be on my side. So we feel isolated, mistrustful of those around us, and it's like you feel like you have to defend yourself all the time. And have you ever felt like you've been in a family or your family or a group or PTA or church or whatever where you felt like you've had to defend yourself all the time? If so, that is an organization and relationships full of toxic triangles. There's some healthy triangles, and even a counselor could be a healthy triangle. But again, that needs to be managed well. But a lot of triangles are to reduce anxiety and to avoid self-responsibility. Often that's why triangles get started. And do you think narcissists want to be self-responsible? No. So they are going to involve people in all layers, all forms of relationships. So what's the solution triangle-wise? Address misunderstandings directly with those involved. And in fact, I've even told people who have come to me and said, did you know so-and-so was mad at you? And I would say, well, I'll know that when they come and tell me that. If you talk to them, be sure to tell them to come and tell me that they're not happy with me. That is a de-triangulation. Oh, but Jerry, I need to tell you what they've been talking about. I understand that you care about me, and I understand that, but I don't know how you and I are going to fix that other than if I go address them on the problem they talk to you about.
and that can create lots of difficulties. And it also keeps most everyone in fear, usually when you have those kind of dynamics. Work to stay neutral. The best that you can is to stay neutral. Wait a minute, I'm not gonna, I want you to agree with me that your brother is not treating me like he should. Well, Mom, I think that's something you probably need to talk to him about. You guys have had a long, long relationship of many, many years. I don't know that my opinion is going to fix that. And so you're going to have to talk to Jim or talk to my brother or talk to whomever. You're going to have to talk to them directly rather than you and I just keeping this secret conversation about him. Which then often usually doesn't, it relieves the pressure from the narcissist, let's say, or the triangle builder. It relieves pressure for them and dumps the toxicity on you. So you walk away with the anxiety. They feel less anxious and now you're more anxious because the hot potato of anxiety has to go somewhere. And if you abdicate your own dealing with your own anxiety, somebody else is going to have to deal with it for you. And that's why I think it's responsible for me to take care of my own anxiety and my own issues. Focus on rebuilding trust wherever you can in any part of a relationship system in the family or elsewhere. Certainly don't defend yourself to any folks who are not open. If they're not open, why are you defending yourself? Because defending often looks weak and guilty. You can do some explaining to those who are open if they wish to hear. There might be an appropriate place for that to explain to those who are open. But even then, it's risky because you're still kind of triangulating and telling your side to them when they've heard this other side. And I don't like that dynamic. It doesn't feel good. Lean on your trusted friends and family members that you do trust. Remember that a narcissist can use family systems dynamics for their purposes. We can learn to use family systems dynamics for our purposes in a more healthy, self-differentiated way. Thirdly, the silent treatment. I'm sure many of you have probably heard of this game. Narcissistic parents might give you the cold shoulder after a disagreement, refusing to speak or engage. It's their way of punishing you, and they also wish to engage you in a pursuit state of them. When I withdraw and stay quiet, I'm clicking on a button in you to pursue me. That's the whole goal of silent treatment. I want you to feel bad, I want you to feel punished, and I want you to be worrying about me and fussing over me and my silence. This can leave you feeling rejected, overly apologetic, desperate to fix things. Well, I just want things to be right, and so I'll go and try to talk to him. They're quiet. Well, what is a good response for silent treatment? And again, many situations are different. I don't give advice to everybody's situation. Context matters, but I tend to think it's good to step back. Instead of doing my reactive knee-jerk response to silent treatment, which is to go and try to fix things, I might step back. I might start focusing on self-soothing, taking care of my insides. Hey, if they choose to not want to talk to me, they can. That's their right. And that I can begin to calmly acknowledge the pattern without feeding into it. I understand this is a pattern that happened, but I'm not going to feed into it. And I'm not going to go running and go reacting to try to get their approval or their acceptance or their love, because then we will just stay on the hook for a long, long time. And you have a right to. If you want, you can even act as though they have not been using a silent treatment. You can even, in some ways, ignore the silent treatment. And I have done that as well. I know they're doing a silent treatment, but then I call them anyway and say, oh, by the way, I still would be happy to pick up your child and go to school. Are they planning on going tomorrow? Da-da-da-da-da. And they can do whatever they want at that time. And if they want to act weird or dismissive, or they can do that. But, I don't always have to respond to silent treatment in a way that is the way they expect. I like responding in an unexpected ways. Fourthly, another game is blame shifting and playing the victim. Narcissistic parents make it seem like everything is your fault and act as if they're the ones being wrong, and it's all about guilt tripping you. This leaves you feeling emotionally drained and questioning your role in the conflicts. What is the way out? Stick to the facts. Don't over apologize and recognize that their blame isn't about you. It's their avoidance of their responsibility. Because, and I think this is something I did not see for many, many years and when I was younger, that because someone accuses me, blames me, maybe let's even take the worst case scenario. I was wrong and they're blaming me. Blame is still not a good emotional state. It's not an adult emotional state. I can address someone about an issue without using a blame state. And I think oftentimes, again, people will use the blaming to avoid understanding their own role in the whole dynamic, understanding their own part that they played, and they wish to keep the focus totally on you, so that it can absolve them of any responsibility they have for anything they did. So blaming is not a good thing. It's not a good emotional state. So we want to recognize that, again, their blaming is about you. Now, I fully intend to take responsibility for wrongs that I've done, things that I've done, certainly if I have made mistakes, I have no trouble. It's not a big problem to do that. No one likes to, but I certainly, hopefully I've grown to a place where I can do that. But I want to be careful about taking their blame personally and focus on what actually happened and were the facts and what part, if any, did you play, or recognize, especially a narcissistic parent, will use blame to avoid their own responsibility. It's probably not good to bring up that dynamic with them. Well, you're just blaming me because you don't want to take responsibility for your own behavior. You're free to say that, but I don't think it's going to help you with a narcissist. You need to accept that that's a part of their immaturity. Fifthly, another game is love bombing and withdrawal. One moment, the narcissistic parents are full of affection and praise at times because it looks good for them. And the next, they're cold and distant. It's designed to keep you dependent on their approval. This push-pull dynamic can make you feel anxious and unsure of where you stand. One of the things I've tried to help people do, which is a kind of a backdoor approach to when I feel hurt, when I've been rejected, then don't get so excited when you get accepted. If you want to reduce the pain of being rejected, don't count on so much and put so much weight on when you've been accepted by someone else. Oh, I just feel so loved and so accepted by them now. That's going to make it really tough when they withdraw that. So you want to be careful and keep balanced. If I get so caught up in people saying, Jerry, you've helped me so much with your videos. And many people have said that. And I'm deeply grateful. I really am grateful. And I do like to hear those things. But if they make me too much of what I am, then that's a problem. Because I need to be who I am, regardless of the compliments or the complaints. And so we want to keep a balance in that way. So I'll even help them. Now, when that person comes back and brings you flowers and goes, oh, I love you so much. You're so wonderful. Be careful how much you get taken in by that. To reduce that will help you when the other side hits. And I talk more about that in other videos and in the online program. To break free from the love bombing and the withdrawal, recognize the cycle, prioritize your self-worth. In other words, you're who matters to you and how you value yourself. Create boundaries about what you will accept. And certainly narcissistic parents play also other games. I realize that, but I can't share all of them today. So what can you do? Here's some self-differentiation tips. Focus on building your sense of self. Rediscover who you are outside their influence. Affirm your worth and remind yourself you don't need their approval as an adult. Also, don't expect them to change. Narcissistic parents are unlikely to change. Is it impossible? Well, I don't think anything's so much impossible. I mean, that's relative and that gets deep if you're going to discuss that. But I mean, I can certainly say, well, some narcissistic parents could change. But I think the change level and statistics on that are small enough that it's probably better to consider don't expect them to change. Reduce your reactivity to their mind games. Don't become reactive. Stay calm. Set boundaries. Be clear about what's acceptable and hold firm to those boundaries. Limit how much access they have to parts of your life they intend to manipulate. You may need to have some areas off limits to narcissistic parents. Limit or cut contact. If their behavior doesn't improve, you might need to create more distance. Low contact or even no contact can help you reclaim your sense of inner peace. But remember, physical distancing or physical cutoff is not the end result. We want to get them out of us, not just us away from them. We may want to get us away from them, and you may need to get you away from them, but they're still getting them out of you, which is a whole nother level of work that we want to do. And certainly give up your own overfunctioning. If you're ready to finally break free from the grip of dysfunctional family dynamics and build a strong, confident sense of self, free from others' control, manipulation, or dysfunction, join my free training today. Start building the life you were always meant to live. Click the link below and get started. Make sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon to be the first to see the new videos that come out that I publish weekly. It's time to get your family out of you and finally be your true differentiated self. Thanks for watching. Have a great day and be wise.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jerry Wise, and I'm a life and relationship coach. I've been working with people for over 40 years. And this video is entitled, How Do I Stop Loaning and Borrowing Self? I hope that you'll join and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Click the bell for the newest videos that come out. I also have 3 workshops for rent or purchase on my website. And I do have a workshop coming up April 10th, 2021 on Saturday on overcoming shame and guilt through family of origin work. And I might mention, it's not a matter of you have to go talk to your family about all that. It's about dealing with the family of origin within you. It can include an actual live family of origin that you're dealing with, but it's dealing with the past family of origin and how you function in the present family of origin for you, for that workshop. Let me start by saying, when we grow up in a dysfunctional family and we receive the transgenerational inheritance of low self-differentiation, low self-esteem, shame, guilt, abandonment, all of those things that occur in dysfunctional families, this sets us up for borrowing and loaning self to maintain our bucket, which is pretty empty, and to maintain an equilibrium of self, and we need to borrow or loan it to do that, and I'll talk more about that. I have to give something of myself or borrow something from you to be a self, is what I'm talking about. And so we end up living in this ongoing dance of loaning, borrowing, And this is so common for adult children of alcoholics, adult children of narcissists, adult children of abuse, or any other number of problems that people experience growing up. Said in another way, when I feel a deficit of self And it can be unconscious until we learn to be aware of it and identify this. So it's many times starts out unconscious. When I feel a deficit of self, I must acquire from you a measure of self that I lack. And when I feel a deficit of self, I may loan some of myself to you so that I can fill up my bucket and take care of some of that deficit. So there's this loaning and borrowing going on. Let me describe this process a little more. Again, I need to say with many of my video topics, I only have a short amount of time I can discuss this topic, so I can't cover everything about it, but I at least wanted to introduce you to it. Any of the topics that I do as videos on YouTube end up being the basis for doing individual work with clients and coaching them, because there's many more ways we can apply it individually to ourselves. So I'm speaking in general. Please take all these comments as comments in general. It may not fit your situation exactly, but I want to give some examples that might help, because we don't have enough time to cover the whole subject on this. That's why I do workshops, so I can spend more hours talking about and going into depth about some of these subjects. So what does loaning of self look like? How would we be able to identify it if we're loaning self? And of course, one of the most obvious ways is if we overfunction. Codependents overfunction many times. And that overfunctioning is a loaning of self to others. I overfunction so that you will feel better and have more sense of self, or feel more well, or feel more happy, or have more peace, but I will overfunction to do it. So I'm loaning self to you. Over empathizing is another way of knowing that we are loaning self. Staying in a victim role or a victim mentality is also a loaning of self. When I'm the victim, when I'm a victim, and I believe there are victims out there who have been victimized, and then we want to move to surviving and recovering. But if we stay in the victim role, we're loaning self to the perpetrator. We're loaning self to someone who has victimized me. And often we will do that with a lot of people around us when we stay in a victim role or victim mentality. Over agreement is another way in which we may loan self. I'm going to overly agree with you. Absorbing the feelings of others is a loaning of self. Here, let me absorb your feelings, which then is not very self-oriented for me. I'm going to absorb your feelings. Now you're going to feel better, but I'm going to absorb all your feelings. So I'm loaning some self to you so you feel better. Giving up self to make others feel better or to feel stronger. And of course, the option is giving up self or loaning self, borrowing self, and then being self. Those are the three states that we can think about. And so I'll be talking about then what do we do if we're not borrowing or loaning? But let me talk about the loaning a little more. Taking responsibility for other people's feelings. I made them feel hurt. I made them feel ashamed. I made them feel abandoned. I made them feel I'm loaning self to them. And they don't have to figure out their own abandonment, their own rejection, their own hurt. They know what the problem is. It's you. And I just loan a part of myself to them, and then they feel better because they know where the problem is. It's me. I don't want to loan self in that way. Enabling others, of course, and that's part of the overfunctioning too. When we're enablers, we are loaning self to other people. And of course, you can well imagine loaning and borrowing self is not a way to be a self. It's not allowing other people to grow up. It's not allowing other people to take responsibility for their own lives. we just play this dance back and forth, especially if it's, say, an enabling dance. And then change doesn't have to happen. Nobody's got to change if it just stays the same. And if I keep loaning self, they'll just stay in their borrowing of self because that feels great. So what does borrowing of self look like? And here are some examples. These are not all the exhaustive examples, but I just wanted to give you a flavor. Being angry or aggressive or overly assertive. That's a borrowing of self. I'm going to puff up and be angry and mad, so I'm going to have a self. Now I have a self. And you're going to feel weak, and you're going to be traumatized, or you're going to be, and you're going to be less than and less of self. Becoming reactive. If someone becomes reactive, they're also borrowing self because they're being reactive on you, reactive with you. And so they feel more of a sense of self if they're doing this reactivity because they're going, you're causing it or the situation is causing it, and I have every right to react. Well, no, you're just gaining a sense of self and a hope, not real self. These are pseudo-self. You're gaining some self at the expense of other people. And that's borrowing self from other people. Underfunctioning can be another way. Let's talk about the alcoholic. If the alcoholic is underfunctioning, when they underfunction, then everybody comes in to help them and they borrow self from all them to feel better, to feel okay, to feel more at peace, to feel more calm. And so they're borrowing self from all these folks. Shaming others is another way of borrowing self. If I'm shaming you, then I feel up and you are down. And so our shift in self, I'm borrowing this much self to be up here. If I'm shaming, if I'm blaming, then I go up and I'm borrowing these units of self here from you. And that's how systems works, and that's how emotional relationship and emotional systems operate. Guilting others is another way of borrowing self. Well, I'll just guilt you. And I remember mom sometimes, my own mother, she would say something that would be guilting to me, and then I would feel bad, and myself would be in some ways diminished. Even my pseudo-self would be diminished, and she would gain self because she's one up. You're doing wrong, Jerry. You're doing something wrong, and you should feel guilty. And that's the borrowing of self for me. I go down, she goes up. And that space between us is what someone gets from that. And they feel righteous or self-righteous or morally better, or, they feel more of a stronger pseudo-self. And again, we are talking about a pseudo-self. Because a real self doesn't need to shame, blame, and guilt others. Pseudo-self does. I don't have enough self, so I'm going to do this, and then I'll get some from you. Taking a poor me position. And again, that's if we take the poor me position, I'm going to borrow self from everybody else who's going to try to rescue me, help me, feel sorry for me, and then I feel more of a sense of pseudo-self. Playing a role, any role in the family, or roles at work, or roles with friends, or roles at the church, or mosque, or synagogue, or wherever we're at, whatever roles we play, those roles are a borrowing of self from the role and the system. Now, I'm not saying all the roles are fun and they're all good roles, but they are, we do absorb some sense of pseudo-self with that role that we're playing. We gain something in some way. Choosing the family super self over being a self. A little more complicated. All families have a super self. They all partake of that super self. And if we're partaking of that super self, then we're borrowing self from the super self. and I want to be more detached and more self-differentiated, that I neither need to loan myself to this super self system, nor do I need to get something from the super self system. I want to be more self-differentiated. And many times work departments can have a super self, churches, organizations can have a super self, the PTA. It's how we're all supposed to function in this, and you have your role and you need to function that way, and especially with families and in relationships with our family of origin. Choosing anxiety and not regulating our anxiety can also be a way of borrowing self. Because I'm feeling really, really anxious and I'm doing all kinds of reactivity. And in some ways, you're right, it's uncomfortable. I don't like that. It may feel bad. I may not even be aware of it, that I'm being triggered by anxiety. But in some way, I'm going to try to find some self through this reactivity and anxiety, because I'm feeling anxious and I'm feeling reactive. So this reactivity is going to go out, and I'm going to borrow some self from that. Using triangles to maintain our sense of self. That's also a borrowing of self. When, if Mary tells me, Jerry, I didn't like that you and Fred went to the party and didn't invite me, and I think Fred's pretty selfish that way, and really I don't know if I want to be friends with you anymore. Now I start feeling reactive, I start feeling anxious, then I go talk to Fred about this. Guess what Mary said? Now I'm borrowing self from this triangle. I now need to borrow self from the triangle that we have. And that's going to cause problems. Triangle is an excellent place to borrow and loan self. When I function in a relationship in ways that put me higher, lifts me up, makes me more powerful, or I become superhuman, or I become really exercised or reactive, then I feel like I'm exerting myself, or I'm doing for others what they can do for themselves. Then again, I'm loaning self to others. Remember, if we are not calm, centered, or if we are reactive, we are probably loaning or borrowing self to serve the relationship's balancing needs, or what we call the equilibrium. The equilibrium must be maintained. And if mom goes up and becomes shaming or guilting, for me to maintain the equilibrium, then I usually will go down because I feel guilty, I feel ashamed, and now we're in equilibrium again. Because she's up, I'm down, and now we have maintained that equilibrium that we've had all of our lives. Because just try to stay up. If they go up and someone's shaming or guilting you, try to stay up there at the same place with a sense of self. It's a lot more work, and it requires calmness, centeredness, to be able to not go down and loan that self to them. This balancing is an ongoing process of relationship or systems life, but doing it less and less is the work of self-differentiation. We are always adjusting and adapting in our relationships. I understand that. And it's not just a black and white, you either do this or you don't do this. There's always adapting and adjusting going on, but we want to loan and borrow self less and less, becoming more detached from the relationship, becoming more self-differentiated. We don't do this teeter-totter approach with others. So how do we begin to stop borrowing or loaning self? When relationships or relating becomes more anxious or heated, or you feel more reactivity, stop. Because anything we do on past that is probably going to be a borrowing or loaning if we're not really aware of ourselves. So I like to stop emotionally. I may even stop the interaction. I may need to say, I need to get back with you. I think we should talk about this tomorrow, because I need to do some centering. I need to center myself. Also, I need to become more aware of myself, because if that's happening, if that teeter-totter is happening, if there's reactivity going on, if it's highly charged, and I'm not staying calm, but it's highly charged, then I want to become more aware of myself. And I want to become more aware of my feelings, my body, and my thoughts. Am I being over helpful? Do I feel hesitant or reticent? Do I feel like running? Or do I feel like poor me? Or do I feel avoidant? What is your body saying also? Is your heart rate up? Breathing fast? You have fear or pain or tightness, anxiousness? Your thoughts are going very fast? That's when we need to say, whoa, there's probably going to be some borrowing or loaning going on here. I want to stop and get centered for myself, get my feet on the ground, and come back. Because I may not even know, well, we're going to talk about that. I may not even know what I want or what I believe or what I feel, and we're going to talk about that. So we want to calm ourselves down, take a needed break, slow down your breathing, slow down your speaking pace. I always know when I get talking too fast, there's probably something that has been triggered. And we want to resist reacting to their anxiety and their reactivity. We want to resist reacting to that. And remember, as in Margaret Paul's book on inner bonding, she talks about nobody can make you feel something, and you can't make somebody feel something. Our feelings are our responsibility. Their feelings are theirs. Even if they're saying it's your fault for me being reactive, that doesn't make it true. Define yourself. And so we want to stop and define ourselves. You know what? Ask yourself, what do I want? What do I believe in this situation? Ask yourself, what are my values and principles in this situation? What's most important to me? And what do I believe? I encourage you to practice self-differentiation as taught by many of my videos. Also Harriet Lerner, Jenny Brown, Brene Brown, Roberta Gilbert, and other Murray Bowen Family Systems authors. I also encourage folks to become more aware of their triggers for borrowing and loaning self. And guess what some of those triggers would be? Shame, abandonment or fear of abandonment, rejection, guilt, worthlessness, self-hate or self-rejection, and many others that can be triggers for I'm either going to give up myself or I need to borrow self by becoming reactive. Let me give you some more examples of borrowing and loaning self. Borrowing self. Mom says you are so ungrateful and so selfish. She needs to be up, and so you need to be put down. Because she's needing to get up. She needs to shift the teeter-tot that way. Teeter-totter that way, so that she can gain some self. She's needing to gain some self and to be righteous or up or knowledgeable or parenting or your mother or whatever she needs to do. Loaning self, I might respond, well, Mom, what can I do to make you feel better about me? That's a loaning of self to her. I don't need to loan a self to her. I don't need to loan to fill up her sense of pseudo-self. Selfing response, Mom, I don't see it quite that way. I know that's how you feel, but I see it and I see me differently. And then I might go on and say, and what's for lunch? Because that conversation is not going to go well if I stay engaged in it. And especially if mom or the other person is exercised or triggered or is intense, or it's not going to go anywhere positive. So I want to make a self-differentiating statement, and then I can move on. And if there's enough relationship between us where it's warmer or more respectful or more open, then I could also go further and say, well, I don't see it that way. And I would ask you to not make statements which are put downs to me. But again, you have to have more of a relationship to be able to do that. Because again, they just may get more reactive. Some people might respond to that, and some family members might respond to that. Another example, borrowing self. Your brother says to you, I'm always the one who the family blames, and I'm tired of it, Mary. Loaning self. Mary's going to say, well, that's not true, Bill. You're looking at it wrong. I really think you're great. Here, Mary is trying to be encouraging and trying to build her brother up. Building up someone often does not work, nor does it last. And yet I've kind of loaned some self out to do that. I would encourage you, if you're interested in encouragement, to read the book by Dr. Larry Crabb, C-R-A-B-B. It's entitled Encouragement. And I really like how he expresses, if you really want to encourage somebody, the best way to do it is to address the fear. If you really want to encourage someone. And so you might want to read that. He's a good Christian psychologist and does a great job on that topic. I learned a lot from him. Now, so I've talked about the brother making the borrowing statement, the Mary making the loaning statements. Hey, I hope you'll feel better. What can I do to make you feel better? You're looking at it wrong. I really think you're great. Why don't you look at yourself as being great? A self-response would be, Bill, I'm sure you have felt that way. I view you differently. I hope someday those views can change for you. And if you're noticing, I'm saying, I view you differently. I'm not trying to make him view himself differently. I'm just giving information about how I view him. That's what I'm doing, which is my honest, authentic self. He doesn't have to accept that or believe it, and I just say differently. But that is a statement of difference. It's not, let me try to convince you that you're good and you're okay and don't feel that way. And, I don't want to get into that, because now we're into loaning and borrowing self. Now, Bill can take my statements and, I said, I view you differently, Bill. I'm sure you have felt that way. I acknowledge what he said, and I hope someday those views can change for you. And what I'm implying is those views could change for you if you do the work to change those views. But I'm not your therapist, so I just would want to go, I hope those views change for you. Another example, loaning self. My friend says, well, let me do that, Jerry. I'll call all the people for the party. I'll also bring all the food. I borrow self by saying, well, okay, if you really want to. And I'll just let them be up there and I'll take what they're going to give me. The self is, well, that doesn't seem quite fair, Mark. How about we split the list in calling them, and I'll bring my share of the food to the party. Borrowing self and loaning self. Here's a borrowing self. Well, if you want to improve our relationship, why don't we talk every day? I would like you to talk every day. I've had clients that have been trying to work out their relationship with their sister, and the sister is demanding about how often they contact her. And I'd like you to call every day. Loaning self response by the client would be, well, okay, I guess I could do that if that's what you want. Now we have a borrowing self and a loaning self. A self response is, sis, I think it would be more realistic for me to call you and that we talk once a week. I would really enjoy doing that. Another example, let's say borrowing self, your boss says he's borrowing self, I think you should take over Bob's job while he's away on leave. Loaning self, okay, boss, I'll do it. Versus a self response of, I'd be happy to help with all the things I'm responsible for. I could do these 3 things that Bob does until he comes back. Would that work? And again, I'm negotiating while taking myself into consideration. Another example, loaning self. I should tell the pastor that I will take over the whole children's program at the church because no one else will do it. And I think it will make the church happy and God too. And borrowing self, the pastor goes, we'd love for you to do that, Jerry. A self response would be, Pastor Kevin, I might suggest our church educate our members on service and start some service groups or service committees or that can share the responsibility for what we need to have done at the church. Because I know the pastor can't do everything, and everyone should be invested in our church according to their gifts and their abilities. And certainly I'm willing to be of help or to head up one of the committees, or I don't mind doing that. I take into consideration myself and the situation. Another example of loaning self, I'm tired of you always criticizing me and making me feel bad. Well, you do it too, Mom, and I learned criticizing from you, Mom. A self-response. I'm sorry you feel that way to always feel criticized by me. Maybe we need more time where we just enjoy our time together without conflict. And one last example, a husband comes home from work, says to his wife, borrowing self because he's not feeling good. He's feeling down and he wants to borrow that self from her. Well, Mary, what did you do all day? Loaning self, well, I watched the kids, I did the dishes, I cooked, I cleaned the pantry. I just don't sit around here all day, Steve. Then we have the loaning of self and borrowing of self. Steve feels up here and superior. A self response, I think of, well, Steve, why do you ask? Or Steve, what's on your mind? Or how was your day? Steve, was there something you wanted me to do? Because his question is not looking for an answer, it's looking for an impact. And often when we go into answering it, we're forgetting that it's looking for an impact, not necessarily an answer. I want to share with you, I have a workshop coming up in April. I hope that you'll sign up on the website to get updates. There are 3 workshops available, which I believe would make for a great masterclass, and check out all 3 for sale or rent. I want to thank you for joining me today. Have a great day and be wise.
Hello, my name is Jerry Wise, and I'm a relationship expert and the director of the Center for Self-Differentiation. I do individual, marital, and family coaching. And I'll bet with this topic of this video, you probably don't hear much about this subject. The topic of this video is entitled, Over Seriousness Kills Self-Differentiation. I have a lot of folks who contact me who are interested in learning more about self-differentiation and a family systems approach to being self and learning to increase your sense of self in a healthy way. And they are always talking to me about how they can improve their self-differentiation. So, first of all, what do I mean by over-seriousness? Over-seriousness is a reactive state. When we become reactive, when we become immature, when we become naive, but it's a reactive state in which we enmesh through seriousness and intensity. This lessens our self-differentiation and clouds our self-awareness. It also indicates we're not very self-aware at that time. Recently I was watching the comedy series The Office, and in fact the whole series is based on a back and forth dialogue between Dwight, and you don't have to be familiar with the show, but Dwight becomes over serious so often. So does Michael, the manager. Many people become over serious at certain times, and it creates a comedy. And whereas Jim and Pam, who are characters in the show, are not quite so serious about life and are more flexible and are able to stay more themselves and not get caught up in the immaturity and the craziness of the storyline of the Office comedy. And so what happens is, so often people are talking and then someone all of a sudden becomes very serious, and this creates a humorous situation. Well, in real life, if we're the ones becoming serious, it doesn't feel very funny. The person who's become over serious has become over serious, and so therefore they don't see the humor. They're not flexible, they're not more loose internally, they've become solid or rigid at some point. And I think this reflects a level of self-differentiation that's lower. It also tends to freeze us up. We tend to become more paralyzed inside and have fewer options emotionally and mentally. Healthy closeness is good. Enmeshment and fusion hinders intimacy and calmness in a relationship system. And this video is about one of those concepts and skills we learn in practicing self-differentiation. It's similar to the confusion skill that I mentioned in the video, and I hope you'll watch it. And I have a video on confusion and how it can be a helpful way to stay self-differentiated. So, why does over-seriousness equal reactivity? And by the way, serious is not a problem. Over-serious is a problem. Certainly if I go into a funeral, I'm not going to be very playful in that situation. I'm going to be more serious or somber. But someone can become so over-serious that, in fact, someone does something funny to kind of break the over-seriousness tone that's felt. The same thing that happens at church, at synagogue, in different places where we're supposed to be serious. If it becomes too serious and something very human happens, then everybody laughs and it breaks that over-serious tone. So why is over-seriousness reactivity? Over-seriousness is too much intensity, which inhibits relationships' fluidity and the healthy relationship dance. In other words, once someone becomes over-serious, it kind of stops the interplay between the two people in a relaxed and fluid way. And that over-seriousness is about our immaturity when we become over-serious. And by the way, this video is about our own over-seriousness. Another video I'm going to do is about how do you deal with someone who has become over-serious? How can you deal with them in a self-differentiated way? In this video, it's how can I understand my over-seriousness and get an idea as to what it means and how to examine it so that I can become healthier and more a sense of self. Why does over-seriousness equal reactivity? Because when we become over-serious, it's like grabbing the lapels of someone else in the relationship. Whoever I'm relating to, it's like grabbing their lapels with my over-seriousness. With our over-seriousness, we miss the process of what's going on in our relationship. And we actually end up focusing on the content of the relationship and not on the process of the relationship and what's going on. For example, when I was a parent and my son was very young, I told him he couldn't go see a friend. He was, I don't know how old, 7, 8. And he wanted to go to his best friend Tommy's house. Well, it was 9 o'clock at night. It was a school night. And of course, he couldn't go see Tommy. We weren't going to call Tommy's parents and say, hey, can Andrew come over and play with you? Certainly it just couldn't be done, and a good parent would not allow that. So I said, Andrew, no, I'm sorry, we can't do that tonight. It's about time for bed. We're not going to have you go see Tommy. Andrew becomes upset, as kids will do. It's appropriate. And he goes, oh, I just hate you, Daddy. You're the worst dad in the world. Now, many parents at that point would become over-serious. In other words, they focus on the content of what Andrew is saying and start defending why they're not the worst parent in the world. Some parents would become overreactive or over-serious and become over-authoritarian. Well, I'm just going to spank you, or I'm going to discipline you harshly for saying those harsh words. Either way is over-seriousness. Then there, I think, is a more self-differentiated way and a less immature way to react to a child who's doing something to try to get you to do something they want to do, which is Andrew's goal. Andrew's goal was not to shame me about being her dad. Andrew's goal was to get me to let him go see Tommy. And so when he said, Dad, I hate you, you're the worst dad in the world, I remember saying, Andrew, I think you're right. Conversation's over. It takes two to argue. And I wasn't going to argue with an 8-year-old about whether I'm the best dad or the worst dad, because that's not even what this whole issue was about. The whole issue was, no, you can't go to Tommy's, and that's all that matters. I'm not going to become over-serious about your pleadings. So, no, you'll just have to go up to bed, and just remember, you have the worst dad in the world, and hey, there's no other dads available, so I'm your dad, and that's the way we have to deal with it. So becoming over-serious can really cause problems in a relationship, for parenting, in marriages, because the same thing happens in marriages too. How many times do spouses say to other spouses, well, if I had a wife who was halfway as good as so-and-so, and it's just, it becomes something to get someone's button pushed. And in the world of self-differentiation, we don't want to allow our buttons to be pushed. That gives someone else too much power. And when we've grown up in dysfunctional families, we tend to have buttons in which we give our power away. And so with Andrew, I wanted to deal with what was going on, not what was being said. And so my response was about what was going on. In other words, he'd like me to get reactive so that he could win and either go to Tommy's or I would become upset. Well, I'm not going to do either. So I'm just going to agree with him. And that tends to diffuse what's actually going on without focusing on the content. Why does over-seriousness equal reactivity? Because when we become overreactive, we become less aware. And I know in the show The Office, and again, I hate to go back to that if you haven't watched that show, but you've known people like this. Dwight is the one who he's pretty immature emotionally, and he can easily be tricked. He's naive. He's not a dumb man. He's a very intelligent man, but emotionally his IQ is kind of low. And so people can trick him and do things like that. They do that to each other throughout the show. And so, with the When Dwight becomes over serious in a reaction to Pam and Jim, for example, he loses a sense of self-awareness and doesn't realize what he looks like, how he's acting. You can just notice a lack of self-awareness all over. Well, the same is true for us when we become over serious. Think of the parent whose child says, "Oh, I just hate you. I wish I had Susie's mom for a mom." And then your child's your child says this to you, and then you start going crazy and feel insecure and guilty because you're not as good a mom as Susie's mom. And then you start acting outside yourself. And then we stop having self-awareness. That's the problem. And we start looking odd or funny because it's not really us. We'll either overreact and maybe punish too harshly, or we'll go cry off in the corner, and it really becomes a situation in which we become self-unaware. Why is overseriousness equal to reactivity? Because we become rigid and inflexible, and we're less open to ourselves and to others, as I mentioned earlier. We really do close down our awareness on what's going on when we become over-serious. So let me give you some examples in which over-seriousness occurs. And by the way, I'm not trying to argue any of the political issues or the social issues that I may bring up. I'm simply giving examples of over-seriousness. Someone can be talking, and today Obamacare or the affordable health care is kind of a hot topic for many people. It divides people because they become over-serious about one side or the other. So just go to your office water cooler, and if someone's saying, I've got a nephew who just lost his health insurance, which by the way I have, and I thought, well, maybe he could get health insurance through the Affordable Care Plan, and I'm just talking out loud, and then someone says, well, oh my gosh, not Obamacare. Well, that's the worst thing that's happened to our country. It's going to destroy our economy, and it's going to destroy our healthcare system. Now, I was simply pondering whether my nephew, it might be something he might look into or not. The other person becomes over serious about that issue and start preaching it, and that over seriousness is a part of reactivity on their part, because I realize they're not being very rational at this point. They're thinking with their emotions, not their thoughts, and they have been caught up in their own emotional thinking process. And so they're not themselves, they're who they think they should be or a cause they think they should have. I wasn't even arguing the cause either way, for or against Obamacare, for or against the affordable health care cost. I wasn't even arguing that. I was just pondering, what if my nephew did X, Y, and Z? And I think that happens in politics, in religion. If you want to find people who become over serious, talk about politics, talk about religion. And I think that's why many people advise when you have family gatherings, families should not talk about politics or religion. And why is that? Because inevitably a number of people become over serious about it and can't have a discussion about it. They become over serious. Not serious, over serious. And they become rigid. They become either preachy or defensive or reactive, or if I come to this house one more time and hear somebody talk about George Bush, I'm never coming back to this family gathering again. And again, that's reactivity, and then I have to cut off as a result of that, which indicates a low level of self-differentiation, not a higher level. And so we're trying to work towards raising our level of self-differentiation. I think, so there are a number of religious and political issues that can cause reactivity or over-seriousness. The same is true in relationships. We can become very serious about that. For example, a husband is talking to his longtime wife. They've been married 20 years. And he says, my first girlfriend in high school and I went to Kings Island and we really, really enjoyed it. And the wife says, well, you never invited me to Kings Island the whole time we had been married. Do you identify the husband's making a neutral statement about the past, not that he wants to be with that girlfriend again, just a neutral statement remembering a positive time? The wife becomes over serious about that event, and now she is caught in that over seriousness, and that's her reactivity. Or the classic kind of humorous way to look at over seriousness, it's when somebody says, well, good morning, and another person says, well, what do you mean by that? That's the classic over seriousness. I don't know, all I said was good morning. I meant nothing more than just good morning. They have become over serious. If we become, what do you mean by that? If we're the ones saying, well, you never invited me to Kings Island the whole time we've been married, then we need to look at how over seriousness plays out in our lives. Let me give you one other example. A 62-year-old father tells his 30-year-old daughter, who is divorcing her husband, I want to support you during your hard time. I know it's hard for you, honey. If there's anything I can do, let me know. And the daughter says back to him, all the men in my life abandoned me, starting with you, Dad. Now, do you see any over seriousness there? By the way, Dad has apologized about 10 times for the things that went wrong in their childhood. He's tried to be kind and supportive to his daughter, but his daughter is still caught in that. And so she becomes over serious and can't accept easily the support and love her dad wants to give her right now. So over serious is a real problem, and it indicates an immaturity and indicates some issues that need to be resolved. Let me use the example of the skin. The skin is a good organ to think of how our self should be in terms of a healthy way. The skin should be moist, supple, smooth, flexible. If it becomes hard, brittle, blistered, cracking, dry, solid, then it doesn't function near as well. The skin as an organ needs to be smooth and functional in that way. So does our sense of self. So does who we are needs to be that way and not become hard and rigid at some point. Because once we become hard and rigid, that's not a healthy biological state, nor is it a healthy emotional state. And that's why when people try to engage me in controversial examples, and people do that all the time, having been a pastor in the past, I have a number of people say, well, what do you think about XYZ? They're always wanting to, and I can tell they've already become over serious. I'm not the final authority on X, Y, and Z. Does it matter what I think about X, Y, and Z? I mean, does it matter about their care or what's going on with them or how I'm helping them? Oftentimes it's an issue they have that they haven't resolved, and they're trying to draw me into it. Do you believe in baptism and that you should do it in this form or that form? Or do you believe, and it's like, why are we talking about this? I didn't bring it up. And why do those doctrinal beliefs, if that's what you believe, that's fine. You don't have to use that as a test to pressure our relationship. It's not necessary. And that indicates to me some immaturity on their part. What I advise people to do is to notice over seriousness in your life and in others. Notice when you become over serious. Resist, own, and resolve your own over seriousness. When you become over serious, begin to identify what you need and want, because often you probably haven't done that. And so over seriousness becomes a problem. Ask yourself, if you want to deal with over seriousness, ask yourself, what would I lose, or what would be the downside of not being over serious about this? What fears would I have? What anxiety would that create? What problems would that cause for me? I know I used an example where, and I didn't share that example, but I might now. an example, because religion is also one of those where people become really very over serious. And you can be talking and just posing the thought of, with all of astrophysics that we know, I just wonder how God fits into that. And I'm just pondering that. And then someone pipes up, well, let me tell you what the Bible says. The Word says, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then they quote Scripture and go on. And they become very serious when someone's just pondering openly. And they become serious, and almost it becomes a test of faith for everyone. And again, that's where someone becomes over serious about a situation. So let me use some examples that I've given you as to how we might take a look at what's behind the over-seriousness. With the daughter and the dad, if the daughter did not become over-serious with her dad, if she were to think about that and go, boy, I really wanted to get upset with my dad, I really wanted to blame him for the past or whatever, and if I didn't say that, if I didn't get over-serious, then I would feel Dad would get away with what he did when I was a child and how he treated me as a parent. There's a clue as to what needs to be resolved in the daughter. Not fixed in the dad, that's for Dad to fix, but what needs to be fixed in the daughter so she doesn't get owned by that, so she doesn't give her power away because of that. Let's look at the Bible example. If the person who's got to quote that scripture and has to preach to everyone about what the Bible says at this moment, just when someone was harmlessly thinking about, the metaphysics of astronomy and physics and God, oftentimes, because I have been that person who has been over serious about the scripture, about the Bible, and I take a look at, if I didn't do that, if I didn't bring up the scripture and quoted the scripture to everyone, well, I can't let someone not understand what the Bible says, or God would be mad at me, or I would not be witnessing enough to please God. And again, those are my issues that I haven't resolved. God's very, very capable of taking care of his universe. I'm not the one that has to make it all work. And then end up alienating everybody in my life by becoming over serious. The husband in the King's Island example. And so if the wife did not get over serious, my husband would not know how much I wish he would pay attention to me and treat me in a special way. Again, that's an issue for the wife that she hasn't resolved. And learning how to ask for those needs, working out those wants within her marriage, rather than just becoming over serious and then causing a breakdown between the two of them in an argument. So, and she also did not feel special or didn't feel like people paid attention to her when she was a child. So that's an old historical thing that she brings to her marriage as well. Let me give you one other example about secrets. Secrets are another way of being over serious. Secrets are about being over serious. And why is that? Because if I didn't keep the secret and I shared the secret, I would feel, if anyone knew the secret, I would not be loved, I would not be accepted, I would not be cared about, I would feel abandoned, shamed, or I would feel my shame or feel my guilt, and so I keep this a secret. Then, every time that issue arises, we become over serious. And you've seen that in families before. The no discussion topics that families have? This is a non-discussable. These are the things we can't talk about in our family. Dad's alcoholism, my sister, I'm using an example of a family in which a sister got sexually abused growing up. We don't talk about that because a stepdad did that, so we can't talk about that. We can't talk about Aunt Mary's drug addiction. We have all these secrets that we can't talk about. And so therefore, anytime anything gets near that topic, everyone becomes over serious. And of course, one of the best antidotes for over seriousness is playfulness. I didn't mean silliness, I meant playfulness. In other words, I want to stay loose and not caught and stuck and connected. Which is why when Andrew says, Dad, you're the worst dad in the world, I say, you're right. I agree with you. I think it's horrible that you have the worst dad in the world. I'm being playful because I'm not going to get caught in what's going on. If you'd like help with self-differentiation, and if you'd like to learn more about being yourself and staying connected to others, give me a call, use my email address and contact me. You can find contact information on the screen. I do see clients in the office or online, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching.